Good afternoon and welcome back. My name is Suerich of CurlingZone.com. We are here with another episode of Splitting the House. Today I'm joined by Doug Suerich of CurlingGeek. You may know Doug from, I think it's the fourth or fifth best way to watch curling. This is, of course, self-promoted this way. They've built this great system where you can actually track shot by shot and watch and follow along that a number of teams have used, and we've seen at events as well. So one of the things that Doug has really been digging into is the whole COVID response. And, I think he's been a valuable resource for curling clubs, for curlers, especially at the grassroots level, the club curlers who are trying to figure out what's going on here. So Doug is a computer scientist by trade, has come up with some simulation as to what the Curling Canada return to curling guidelines look like. And of course, he is a big proponent of wearing masks on the ice as well. So take this with a grain of salt. We are both located here in Ontario, where we've certainly had some challenges earlier with COVID. And I expect to see a mask mandate be put in place for curling in most places. Outside of Ontario, you go out west, I think things are a little bit different, but it's certainly something for your curling club to consider. And also, this interview was recorded about a month ago. There's been a few changes since, specifically out of Oakville, where their Triples Summer League was canceled. A few events were bumped back, but still, a lot of this interview was really pertinent. And certainly, if you want to check out Doug's work, you can find him on Facebook under CurlingGeek, as well, CurlingGeek.com. I'd like to welcome Doug Suerich of CurlingGeek to the show. Thanks for joining us, Doug. Interesting times these days with everything going on. You've certainly been fairly vocal about COVID and curling and the return that curling clubs are working on right now. But first, a little bit about your background. Your CurlingGeek app is fairly well around the sport. It's a way for fans and teams to share games and stuff. A little bit about yourself. How'd you get involved?
Sure. So I've been curling for 20 some odd years now. Now I do come from a curling family. My grandfather was a curler. He, at some point, told us about to a great extent. Both my parents curled out of Brantford, and then I curled a little bit as a young lad, but just going out and pushing rocks a couple of times. Nothing formal, nothing competitive, and then seriously got into the game in university. One of my golf buddies, we played golf together through the summer, the winter. There was to do for four guys who wanted to play together and drink beer, and lo and behold, my buddy said, "Hey, there's this great sport called curling." So jumped in, started playing, and been going at it ever since. So never hyper competitive, always just a club guy, but definitely love the game.
But then you did take an interest in the competitive side of the game, developing CurlingGeek, and it all kind of started at the Kitchener-Waterloo Granite Club, did it not?
Absolutely correct. Yeah, so I've been a member of the KW Granite Club forever. Started there, when I was in university, and was tracking definitely the pro game, but a lot of it was sort of that level below. So the Granite Club's a fairly competitive club. We spit out a lot of curlers, a lot of Grand Slam curlers, and we had players who were playing around the province in various regional and provincial playdowns. Didn't know what was going on in the games. I got quite annoyed, no offense, at going to Port Curling Zone, depending on your website.
Yeah, it's only really good for every 15 minutes, right? If you start getting every shot tracking up there, then all of a sudden it adds to the curling fans' experience to a much degree. So yeah, I love the system that you've built. It definitely brings another way to watch games and give curling fans something they want. And obviously the data is pretty amazing that comes at the same time.
Yeah, well, I've talked before. It'd be great to analytics is just getting started. You're obviously a huge part of that, but the next level is definitely going to require bigger knowledge about exactly where the rocks were when stuff happened. So
Yeah, for sure.
That's coming soon.
Yeah, you got it. One of the things that CurlingGeek has really started to make a vocal approach towards this summer is masks on ice. And I think it's something that you definitely got a lot of fight at the beginning and a lot of pushback at the beginning, but it really looks like that's the trend that's going on now.
And started back in March, so it's amazing to think back how quickly it all happened. But I'm no longer on the board of directors at the Granite Club. I've passed that mantle on to other people, but they were just at the beginning, March 10th or so, starting to think about, well, the world's falling apart. Should we curl? Should we close the club? Should we get going?
Yeah.
And I started clubs to do. That's when I started just a tracker page, a little map, putting some dots on it about which clubs had decided to close. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like on the 12th, there were 3 clubs that closed, and I broadcast that around.
Yeah.
And the next day, there were 20. And then within 3 days, it was in the hundreds, and everything had shut down.
Yeah.
My interest, the impact of club game really ramped up. And the discussion fairly quickly came to, well, how do we start up again? What happens again? And there's 10,000 to go into it. But one of the big highlights is going to be, do we wear masks inside the club going in and out? Like, pretty universally, everyone's saying, yes, you got to wear it going in and out. Do you wear it in the bar? Open question, depends on the region. And then, do you wear masks on the ice? And wow.
Yeah, it's definitely a very polarizing effect, and it's unfortunate that it's come to that. And you look at a lot of the science that's out there now. I follow several different people who have the best science out there. One is an epidemiologist out of, I believe she's out of the East Coast USA. King Gutter Baby is her name on Instagram, and she's actually, yeah, she out before she decided to become a COVID PR person, but she's actually working on trials for remdesivir with real patients.
Oh wow!
So she's right in the middle of this, and the problem is the science and the whole process of discovering COVID and getting to where we are is exactly how the scientific method works, right? It's we learn something, we test it. We learn something, we test it, we challenge it. It evolves over time. Unfortunately, it seems the humans have a hard time with that kind of information. And so I don't blame people who are struggling with this, but at the same time, we need to step back and trust the doctors and the scientists behind this.
Oh, I agree. And I mean, part of science is you make a hypothesis, and if you test it, if you're wrong, then you change it.
Yeah.
So the advice on masks has spun in a few different circles now, but if it turns out to do it, fine.
Yeah.
Try that out. They changed their mind based on, we know a heck of a lot more than we did 6 months ago.
Yeah, we're not wearing masks now for the same reason we thought we should be wearing masks 3-4 months ago, right?
Absolutely.
Mask back originally is meant about not getting sick. And there's lots of evidence out there that suggests that doesn't do a whole heck of a lot for you. The extra touching, all that stuff, it's the whole thing. Lots of people are fighting this back saying, even on the masks boxes, it says this does not protect from COVID.
Yeah.
But again, that evolved to the point now where we wear masks to protect others from if we were sick.
Absolutely right.
And the amount of time, and the amount of time we can be sick without knowing it is a lot longer than we originally too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So masking is...
And masks don't need to be perfect, right? I mean, It's like, oh, they're not perfect. Well, that's fine. I mean, man, if they cut it in half, that would be amazing. And it seems like they do a whole lot more than that. So
yeah, it's really just to prevent the droplets from spreading through the air, right? And in curling, we start at this, and how do we sport, with the interactions that we do see on the ice, and you've kind of come up with some simulations on how to what it looks like, what Curling Canada's guidelines look like. You want to talk us through that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. Can I share my screen here?
Yeah, definitely. It's viewed right now. Sorry.
Perfect. Twist the head over. So I can. So Curling Canada came out with their Return to Curl guidelines, and one of the a bunch of highlights, but one of the highlights was the very last page where they do a diagram of how four-person curling might be able to work in a distance manner.
Yeah.
So the document talked about the fact that, a curling rink is such and such a size, and that means that every person's got this many square feet, and 2 meter distancing is no problem. We're going to go with one sweeper. I think that's almost a no-brainer if you do anything at all.
Yeah.
And then they set up a pattern that people are supposed to walk around when the rocks are thrown. So I wanted to in a static picture, like a one-time snapshot. Everybody's relatively well spaced, although I'll argue in their picture they're not 2 meters apart. But anyway. But it's a lot harder when everything's in motion. So I put together this simulator here to show what happens in a 4-sheet club, people bouncing around. So if there's a few parameters that I can play with. A few things to notice that are important. This club here, I said, okay, they've got a fair bit of space outside sheets 1 and 4.
Yeah.
So there's a fair room at the side. My players don't take advantage of that, but in the real world you would.
A little like the KW Granite Club would look like, right?
Just so happens, yeah. There's and then tied directly into that. So at the KW Granite Club, at the far end, we've got quite a bit of space behind the sheets. So we've got easily 10 feet there. It curves a bit, but there's lots, so that there's room to bounce around.
Yeah. At
the home end, the glass end here, this is fairly realistic. We've got a very tight walkway in behind the hacks here. There's not actually a lot of room. So if you look at the diagram right away, one of the things in the Curling Canada guidelines, so if we look at our number 1 red here, turn your head, that's supposed to be the timer person. So this is the non-sweeping player behind the hack here, and they're going to walk up in time. And you'll see that in motion. But right off the bat, so my circles here are 2 meters across. So if the circles touch, and they're assuming that each person is really skinny. But if the circles touch, that means you're within 2 meters of somebody.
Okay, yeah.
And at the KW Granite Club, and in a lot of clubs, if you don't have a lot of room behind the hack, it's an awful lot harder for this timer person to stand somewhere where they're not going to be within 2 meters of the thrower.
Yeah.
And fine, the thrower's going to face forward, the timer's going to face forward. You're talking at their back, and some of the suggestions out there, that's good, at least But the thrower's going to turn around to get a rock. They're going to do stuff. It's inevitable. They're going to look over their shoulder and say, hey, what did the skip say? What do you think? Do you like this shot? So you are going to have some face-to-face inside that 2 meter distance. So, okay, maybe our number 1 guy can be to the left or to the right, but it's going to be complicated. Let's focus on one player at a time here. So number 1 guy is the timer. Number 2 is throwing a rock. They're going to throw to the button. Number 3 is our sweeper. Should be up a little higher at the hog line, but they're up front. That's okay. Number 4 is our skip holding the broom. And then the other number 4 is the opposing skip. And then we've got our other players. So if we just throw a rock here, we'll see the red team sliding out, tossing a rock. Number 3 guy sweeps it to the end. And, okay, at high-speed motion, it looks like everybody got out of the way. Team red here is highlighted. But I'm going to bring these guys back here. Let this finish, otherwise it gets grumpy at me. My gray team is going to throw here. Everybody's back. I want you to watch for a second what happens at the far end here with the skips. And they're in behind the house. A little bit of that is because most skips do not stand at the tee line. They stand at the back line and hold the broom forward, right?
Yeah.
Because they're putting the broom on. All right, so the gray team here is just throwing their rock. The sweeper powered their way through. Red's going to get set up to throw. So down here, set up to throw. Let's watch our skip at the top side here. So skip's there. He's got his broom on the tee line. Other skip's hiding in behind him. The rock comes flying in, and as I'm sweeping it, powering it, my skip's got to get out of the way, and the other skip's got to get out of the way. And this is the Curling Canada suggestion that they rotate.
Yeah.
If my skip doesn't get out of the way, the sweeper's going to come crashing into them as they're pounding the rock. And man, what do you do there? So either the sweeper's got to. So if I'm the skip and I want to stop there, what's the most important time for a skip? They're yelling over the last 12 feet as you're trying to squeeze around a guard, get something in the house, work an angle, whatever you're trying to do. So that last 10 feet is the most important part. And that's when we want them to scoot out of the way, sweeper coming in. Or you want the sweeper to give up and stop sweeping up in the free guard zone.
Yeah.
Which, again, is going against every single curling instinct. That's the most important time to sweep. It's the most exciting to sweep. And for these three guys down here, or gals, to look at the way they're tripping over themselves here. And these guys, they're being very well behaved, getting out of the way, sliding to the right, sliding to the left. I just don't see it as being realistic that you're going to keep these people 2 meters apart as you're tap dancing over stones. And this is a stone with an in turn to the center line. I'm not throwing out to the side here where I'm colliding with other sheets. That's another good example here. So if we'll pay a little bit of attention to the sheet 2 here, because as the sheet 2 throws is throwing down, they're virtually colliding, at least they're entering the 2 meter space of my non-throwing team on sheet 3. So it gets complicated, it's get weird, you can make a whole bunch of assumptions, but there's not that much room in a curling rink for all these players to be bounced around and not getting each other way, and you're expecting them for a 2-hour period to do this ballet perfectly where they're never going to be within 2 meters of each other. Long story short, put on a mask.
Yeah, I think that's where we're going to see a lot of places default to. I know there's some discussions out there as to how this executes in reality. The Oakville Curling Club is the hosts of the Stucells and the Camerons Brewing Classic in September. I'm in the middle of this, and so regular phone calls with Chris at the Curling Club, following the guidelines, trying to figure out what we're looking at. They're trying to run a triples league as part of their summer league that would typically start in August, but they're going to run that in September is the plan. But again, at this point, we're not sure what's happening. The guidelines currently that we're expecting to see by the time we get to September is maximum 50 people in groups.
Wow, that's in Ontario.
Yeah.
And from a pandemic standpoint, I think it makes a ton of sense. I support it in terms of, keep that, effectively have a 50-person sporting bubble.
Yeah.
And you don't leave it. But from a trying to keep a curling club open standpoint, yikes.
Yeah, that's going to be difficult. And a lot of there's some clarification going on right now about that 50-person bubble. There's been some messaging that went out that 50-person bubble means one league at one curling club, and you're not allowed to be a part of any other curling league, any other recreational activity at all.
Yeah.
That is how, from what I've heard, is going on in Alberta. Though I did talk to some people in important places with our sport in Ontario, because we're starting to clarify guidelines. But from the sounds of things, the response is that that's not something that they are going to be enforcing or pushing for. So that an email was answered to this extent where you could play multiple clubs with multiple 50-person cohorts. And that was the interpretation of the guidelines. Now, Chris in Oakville actually disagrees with that based on his discussions with the local health unit. But again, this could differ from health unit to health unit as well.
Absolutely, and it could change a month in. It could.
Yeah.
That interpretation, which would be very helpful for curling, strikes me as odd.
Yeah, exactly. It's the challenge is going to be how we have these interactions throughout the sport. This is the other part, Phil, is that the triples league that they're going to do is going to require masks on the ice at all times.
Yeah.
The Oakville Spiels are likely going to follow those same guidelines. Because at the end of the day, curling has already failed at the COVID test a couple of times.
No kidding.
The doctors, Bonspiel in Edmonton, Sarah Schuster, who we have just talked to on the show here, talked about the U.S. Club Nationals that I think a lot of people have not realized happened or the case, but they were following the majority of COVID protocols about cleaning and all that stuff, and the vast majority of athletes still came down with it.
Yeah.
So we almost need to go above and beyond as a sport, because don't, if we have a failure somewhere, we're going to be challenged on it for sure. And we need to be doing the best we can to open up. Well, at the same time, we can't just sit at home and do nothing either. We got to figure out the balance with the virus as well.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no such thing as 100% safe. If you wanted 100% safe, we would never curl in the first place, right? There's always some risk on the ice. I mean, kid of granted, we got an older membership. Someone gets hurt once a month. They fall, they whatever. So there is risk associated with it. You're not going to get 0% COVID risk, but can you get it to an acceptable level? And also, just because the regulations say that you can do X, like the public health laws, the regulations that come out, that is the maximum you're allowed to do. You can't go past it, you're breaking the law.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we need to hit that, right? So it doesn't mean it's a good idea to hit that.
Yeah, exactly. I think, the discussion around meatpacking plants, like you mentioned, a cold environment. You go read the guidelines, and it's like curling.
Oh, yeah. So all the people, you don't want to be in a meatpacking environment. Oops. You don't want to be in a choir where people are, taking deep breaths and yelling and screaming.
Yelling.
Check.
Yelling to communicate.
Yes.
Check. Yeah. And long amounts of time together as well is another challenge there. Whereas a lot of discussions suggest this is an accumulation factor. It's not just getting a dose of it and at one time. It's the fact the choir practice discussion that came out of this was a matter of they were in a room for 2 hours together.
That sounds like a familiar number, doesn't it?
Exactly. So, yeah, we're really looking at all the alternatives, trying to figure out how to keep our sport going and get some games in play. We're definitely seeing a significant number of clubs looking at starting later as well. The Highland Club here in London, Ontario is pushing back to January 1. There are at least a couple of clubs in the Greater Toronto area that are most likely not going to start till January 1 as well.
I mean, there's logic in just waiting till there's more information available. Honestly, other clubs really experiment first, which it sounds maybe cold, but it's actually a good idea. Rather than having all 900 plus clubs in Canada turn on at once, well, let's let a small number try it, learn. If there's a disaster, back off, try and fix it up. If it goes well, open her up.
Start filtering them open. Yeah, it's a good thinking. There's, I think the Toronto clubs that are discussing this, it's a financial reason. They do not have the reserves to open in normal date, early October, late November, and then have to go down in November, and then have to try and reopen again in January, February.
Yep, particularly in a year where, absolutely guaranteed your membership is going to be lower.
Yeah.
You're not getting 100% of the people coming back.
Yeah, it's interesting to see in the different places around the country as you talk to the curling clubs. In the places where COVID is low, it seems there's nearly 100% interest in returning to some of these clubs. So, it's a matter of COVID is just at the end of the day. Right? When you look at the Briar in Kingston.
Oh man, we were 1 week away from not having a Briar this year.
Yeah, and I think we were just plain lucky with the crowd in general. Like the virus definitely and spreading at the time. We just happened to not have anybody show up in Kingston with it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it was out there and about in Canada, so
it's when you look at curling clubs and the chance we're going to be fine, I'd suggest in Canada it's fairly high. Curling clubs are going to be fine. The problem is the case roll into a club. And if we're not careful, the entire curling club, the entire league night that night might come down with it.
That's the thing. Like it seems to be that once it's in a given building, like you look at the bars and stuff that are getting hit now in Europe, they're getting urgent, where it's like one night, one bar, there's a couple hundred people in there, and 30 or 40% of them get it all at once. Boom. That's man.
Yeah, that's the challenge, and a COVID case in a club. Apparently 3 is what they call an outbreak. We'll shut down a curling club for 3 weeks.
Does it shut it down? And does it shut one curling club gets an outbreak, you're shut down for that. 2 curling clubs get an outbreak.
Yeah.
By the time the third or fourth one gets one, definitely in a given province, possibly just across Canada, do the public health units across Canada say, okay, this is dumb, shut her down.
Yeah.
Not worth the risk.
So yeah, we need to be careful. We kind of have to be.
Yeah.
When you look at the other sports, when you look at Major League Baseball, when they're having a real disaster right now, a real mess to clean up. NBA, NHL, a positive test there has financial implications, but they have the dollars to actually manage it.
Correct.
A curling club will have financial implications should they have a positive test or 2 or 3.
And at least baseball's getting their positive tests within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Curling clubs, I mean, best case scenario, it's a week. So someone comes in there Tuesday night, something bad happens, they feel bad on Saturday, they take a test, you find out next Tuesday, speedy. That's 7 days of going around associating with other curlers, other players, people play with family members. At that point,
yeah, so it's definitely in consideration. I've had a few questions as to why Spiel has not been canceled yet. At this point, we're probably looking at about a 75% chance that it does not go.
Yeah.
But we're still working together trying to figure out our best possible solution. We've got teams interested in playing, and that's the hard part, right? Everyone's chomping at the bit to get back on the ice, and we kind of have to temper the opportunity and with that.
It's great. Every club should be putting plans in place. Everything's just talk until you turn on your compressors.
Yeah,
That's when you start spending real money. Until then, make plans, do surveys, ask people, throw some registration money in there, whatever. That's fine.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to we're going to try and do reviews throughout the next weeks, try and see what everybody's doing, get clubs on, and get an idea of what's going on out there. I think we need a little bit more communication amongst the groups, and I think this will help the curlers as well understand what's going on, and hopefully we can convince everybody that wants to play curling to wear a mask.
100%.
There you go. Looking good. Thanks again, Doug. I appreciate the time this afternoon. Looking forward to hopefully getting back on the ice again soon.
It's going to happen someday, so stay safe, Jerry.
Cheers.